a little bit about our learning objectives for this session today. You'll also hear a message from Director Cornyn from the Governor's Office of Children's Initiatives. We'll also be giving you a nice overview of the framework, and we'll have a message from State Superintendent Paula DeMaria as well. And we will close with some question and answer time at the end. So just a few housekeeping items. We'll be asking you to keep yourself on mute just to avoid any background noise. And then we will be recording this meeting so that we can post the presentation so that others can view after the meeting. Next slide, please. Okay, so today we'd like you to leave this presentation with a better understanding of Ohio's Whole Child Framework and the available resources to take actionable steps toward implementing programs and services within the framework. And as you hear the presentation today, we'd love for you to go back to your district or building leadership teams or districts that you work with if you are not directly with the district to talk about the framework and explore components in the framework that you think may already be in place within the district or building, or those areas that may not be in place, and consider identifying areas that you'd like to focus on. We'll also be sharing more information about upcoming live events that focus on the framework and its use. And throughout the presentation, we will be collecting questions, as I said, in the Q&A portion of the agenda, which is at the end. So we encourage you to submit questions along the way as they come to you into the chat box. So now I'm really happy to introduce Director Cornyn from Governor Mike DeWine's Office of Children's Initiatives to share a welcome message with you.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be part of today's Whole Child Framework announcement. First and foremost, thanks to everyone who is carving out the time today to participate in this webinar. I know that there are so many other distractions competing for your interest right now, so we are truly grateful for your willingness to take some time to learn about the framework and how it applies to the critical work that you all are doing to support kids during the pandemic. As the Director of Children's Initiatives for Governor DeWine, I'm tasked with working across our state agencies to advance children's issues and also to help align the programs that serve them. Our mission is pretty simple. It's to ensure that future generations thrive. I'm not a mom myself, but I guess that when most parents are asked what they want most for their child's future, almost all would say they want them to be happy and healthy. So to thrive, a child needs much more than just academic success. They need the social and emotional skills to develop meaningful relationships, to cope with life stressors, to make healthy decisions, and to pursue their passions. That's why the Governor's Children's Initiative takes a whole child approach to our work. We know that strong children require strong families and strong communities. So our key priorities, which include expanding home visiting and quality child care, increasing access to school-based healthcare services, supporting universal prevention education in every classroom, and strengthening our foster care system, all really are focused on building collaborative partnerships within communities that support kids and their families. We were incredibly fortunate to secure some historic investments in each of these priorities during the current biennial budget that total more than $800 million in new resources for communities. And these funds have really helped communities to collaboratively build up the supportive services that our kids and families need to succeed. That's why I'm so excited about the Whole Child Framework. It really crystallizes that a whole child approach isn't one more thing for schools to do. It's the one thing for schools to do. And it also helps to further unify our efforts to strengthen the systems of support for Ohio's kids and families. I think we all know that even before the pandemic began, our kids were facing some pretty unprecedented challenges. Obviously, parental substance abuse continues to be a huge challenge that Ohioans face, and the pressures of coming of age in a digital world. Certainly, we know that COVID has only amplified many of those challenges. We know that our kids' brains are hardwired for social interactions, but months and months of quarantine and remote learning can lead to social isolation, which can ultimately result in anxiety, depression, and other mental illnesses. In fact, just last week, the CDC released a new report showing that the proportion of children visiting emergency rooms in mental health crisis is up by more than 30% for our older adolescents, and it's up by more than 20% for kids aged 5 to 11. Additionally, we know that beyond just growing behavioral health needs, many of our kids have also gone without adequate physical health care services during the pandemic. A report by the Federal Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, which oversees the U.S. Medicaid program, noted reductions of almost 70% in routine preventative medicine procedures, things like vaccines, well child visits, and vision and dental screenings. So this makes our collective effort to focus on the needs of the whole child so much more important. When our kids return to school, they're going to have new and very different needs. But I have absolutely no doubt that our schools will adapt and respond, because you guys have proven throughout this pandemic, maybe more than any other sector, that you're nimble and adaptable. Never before have I really seen communities and schools focus more on the needs of the whole child than during this pandemic. When schools closed in March, you all immediately to remote learning. You started delivering IEP and behavioral health services via telemedicine. You all made thousands and thousands of phone calls, sometimes even socially distanced visits to kids' homes for well child checks. You all retrained your staff on signs of abuse and neglect, and how to have those difficult conversations with kids and families. And then you dropped everything to make sure that your kids had access to healthy and nutritious foods, whether that was grab and go, drop off, or even sending us important data to enroll kids in the pandemic EBT program. So I know these exercises have been incredibly stressful for all of you, but I think more than anything, they've really conditioned us to continue to focus on the whole child now and when students return in person. I want to thank every single person on this webinar for their hard work over the past 8 months. Obviously, we still have several very challenging months ahead of us. So please, please, please remember to practice self-care. We cannot care for the needs of kids if we can't care for ourselves. And remember that staff wellness is a critical component of our whole child framework. So again, thank you for everything that you do for our kids and families. Thank you for being here today, and I pray that you all stay well throughout this pandemic. With that, I'll turn it back to Stephanie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Cornyn. That was a great message, and thanks so much for being here with us today. So now we'd like to just set a little bit of context for the whole child framework before we go into the description of the framework itself. So first we wanted to bring your attention to Each Child Our Future, which is Ohio's strategic plan for education. I think by now many of you are familiar with our plan, which is around ensuring that each student is challenge prepared and empowered for his or her future by way of an excellent pre-kindergarten through grade 12 education. And our plan's purpose is really about lifting aspirations, creating hope and excitement, and guiding the development of state-level education policy, as well as promoting high-quality educational practices across the state. So as you know, many Ohioans were involved in the development of our plan, and it's really about ensuring that each child is reaching success through guidance and support of a caring adult. The graphic you see displays all of the key elements of our strategic plan, and what's most important right at the center of our plan is the whole child. And you see that that is our focus and the origin of our work here today. I also just wanted to draw your attention to 3 core principles around equity, partnerships, and quality schools. And around equity, here we're recognizing that Ohio's greatest challenge in education remains equity in education achievement for each child. We also recognize with partnerships that schools should not be doing this alone, that everyone really shares the responsibility of preparing children for the future, and that includes parents, caregivers, and our community partners as well. And around quality schools, we are recognizing that school is the place where all of those partners can come together to support our children. We also recognize that there are 4 equal learning domains, that there isn't just a focus on academics, but also social and emotional learning, as well as leadership and reasoning. And then you can see there are 10 priority strategies. And we can go to the next slide. We won't talk through all 10 strategies, but draw your attention to strategy 7, which is around supporting the whole child. So here we are wanting to work together with parents, caregivers, and community partners to help schools meet the needs of the whole child. And that means being healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. So our plan really called for the creation of a whole child advisory group that was dedicated to helping us develop a whole child model and framework. Next slide, please. So about a year ago, just over a year ago, we formed the Whole Child Advisory Group. And it's comprised of almost 50 education stakeholders, as well as partners around Ohio that can really help us think through the multiple needs that we have in supporting the whole child. So this group includes state agency partners and industry leaders, educational organizations. We have teachers represented, as well as elementary and secondary administrators, superintendents, school nurses, school resource officers, psychologists, counselors, social workers, as well as university partners, and we even have 2 students. The advisory group itself, as we have been meeting, is really focused on helping us see what the essential activities are in meeting the needs of the whole child, as well as helping us think through best practices and developing resources. So there were 3 key charges that the group had. First was around developing a whole school, whole community, and whole child framework. Then it was also around promoting the value of that framework. And then the third charge was around reacting to and informing guidance, models, and examples for Ohio districts to use as we adopted the framework and help with the implementation at the local, regional, and state levels. So the advisory group has been meeting with us over the last year to develop the framework, and then they are continuing to meet with us over this year to really inform implementation of the framework. And so it's really, we are now focused on resources that you can expect to see over the next academic year as well. So with that context, I'd now like to turn it to Jennifer Vargo, our Director of the Office of Integrated Student Supports, to talk about the framework components.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited that we have over 70 participants on this webinar today. And so my role is to really take you through the framework, to go through each of the components, and then to share with you what are our next steps in terms of communicating and disseminating the framework. So what you see before you is Ohio's Whole Child Framework. It was released on October 21st, and as Stephanie said, it was created with a diverse group of stakeholders. I just want to share that Ohio's Strategic Plan for Education, Each Child, Our Future, puts the whole child at the center, where each component of the strategic plan works harmoniously to support a whole child approach. And likewise, Ohio's Whole Child Framework also places the whole child at the center, with districts, schools, families, and community supporting the needs of the whole child using a comprehensive approach. The tenets and the components of the plan work harmoniously to support students' physical and social-emotional wellness, safety, and intellectual development. Next slide, please. A whole child approach broadens district and school focus beyond academics to include meeting students' social, emotional, physical, and safety needs. It's a shift from academics being the only measure of success to a child's total well-being being the greater outcome and goal. Student voice is critical to creating school systems that are responsive and supportive to the needs of children, which is why in our framework we emphasize the importance of including student voice in decisions around academic content, discipline, school culture, free time, and family involvement. Next slide, please. The 5 tenets of Ohio's Whole Child Framework are commonly held beliefs reflecting desired student conditions leading to student success in life and learning. We believe that when students are healthy, feel safe, and are supported through strong systems and relationships, are challenged and experience success, and engaged in learning that is both relevant and meaningful, they are more likely to enjoy learning, develop positive social skills, and achieve greater success. And within each tenet, there are 10 indicators that outline the goals and outcomes of a whole child approach for each of those areas. Schools, families, and communities can use these tenets to create a shared vision and a common language for supporting the needs of the whole child. Each tenet has 10 school indicators that can be used for goals, outcomes, or measures, and to guide and assess their level of meeting the needs of the whole child. And I'm now going to go over very briefly what some of those indicators are in each of the 5 tenets. So healthy means that each child enters school healthy and learns about practices about creating a healthy lifestyle. Indicators of healthy include students having equitable access to health services, whether that's in their school or in connection with community organizations, having a health and physical education curriculum, and instruction and engaging community partners to promote health and student well-being. And safe is defined as each student learns in an environment that is both physically safe and emotionally safe for students and adults. Indicators include schools upholding and modeling social justice and equity concepts, being trauma-informed, and using a positive behavioral and intervention supports framework to prevent, intervene, and support student safety. Supported means each student has access to personalized learning and is supported by qualified, caring adults. Indicators include personalized learning using multi-dimensional teaching strategies, assessing student progress regularly, and adjusting and adapting instruction accordingly. And supported also means supporting families, and that's supporting them in their role as partners in their child's education, as well as supporting the needs of the family if that is required or needed. Challenged means in Ohio, each child is challenged to discover and learn and is prepared to pursue a fulfilling post-high school path, and that each child is receiving curriculum and instruction that encourages to think about the instruction and the content within their own context, but also outside of their own context and throughout the world more broadly. And engaged means each student is actively engaged in learning and connected to the school and broader community. Indicators for engaged include educators using learning strategies that actively engage students, such as cooperative and project-based learning. Students are involved in experiential learning activities, and they are also instructed in content and that is relevant to their lived experiences and those throughout the world. Next slide, please. So this section is the systemic practices for learning and health, and these practices and processes are foundational to the 5 tenets and the 12 components of the framework. We believe that students thrive in schools and districts committed to aligning their work with the needs of their student population. And to best coordinate resources, districts should coordinate policy, processes, and practices, practice cultural responsiveness, deliberately focus on equity, and dedicate time and resources to structured continuous improvement. To create an equitable system, districts and schools need to understand the unique challenges and barriers students face and implement policies, practices, and programs to overcome those barriers. And in this section, districts and schools are provided with questions to help guide them in creating this equitable system. Culturally responsive means schools must develop culturally responsive pedagogy and practices to meet the needs of the whole child. A culturally responsive practice is an approach that respectively encompasses and recognizes both students' and educators' lived experiences, cultures, and languages. And lastly, for successful implementation of a whole child framework to occur, coordination of policies, processes, and practices must occur both at the state and the local level. Districts and schools will need to incorporate the whole child framework as a part of the school and district improvement process. And whole child goals, strategies, and activities become a critical part to their district and school improvement plan. It's important to note that we want to make sure that meeting the needs of the whole child isn't something that you do on the side or isn't something extra. It is what you do as a part of what you do in order to increase the academics and well-being of your children. So these need to be an integral part of your continuous improvement plan and not in addition to. Next slide, please. And so what you see before you are the 12 components. And these components include supporting students in developing healthy behaviors, providing services to students and families, engaging others to support student wellness and success, and components of a safe and supportive school environment. As you can see, these 12 components are banded together by different shades of blue, and that's because those components work together to achieve common goals. And now I will briefly go over each part of those components within the bands of the framework. Next slide, please. So supporting students in developing healthy behaviors. This section emphasizes that schools provide the structure that gives students knowledge and skills to make decisions that positively impact their health and social and emotional well-being. These components highlight the importance of schools providing health and physical education content, physical activities, and social emotional learning opportunities. Educators teach content and provide physical activities for students to learn and practice healthy lifestyles. And these content areas and learning opportunities build critical skills and behaviors necessary to create healthy, responsible, and productive citizens. Next slide, please. Services to students and families. This second group contains the components that represent the various services to our students and families, including school and child nutrition programs, school-based health services, and mental and behavioral health counseling and social services. These services can be provided in the school directly, or they can be provided in partnership with community organizations outside of the school environment. Meeting the needs of the whole child means providing nutrition and physical and behavioral health services to students and families. And physical and mental health services are provided both by licensed school personnel as well as by school community partners. It's also important to note that in this section, schools can link families to services in the community that can help them provide the essential services needed to support students, such as food, clothing, and shelter. Next slide, please. The next grouping is a pair of components that represent the school's responsibility for engaging families and the community in the education process. It emphasizes that schools must create systematic and multiple ways for families to contribute to their child's education and school. It calls on schools to design effective family engagement activities that build strong relationships, increase two-way communication, and empower families to be decision makers in their child's education and in their school. And this section also outlines the importance and benefits of engaging community partners to support students. Community organizations have a wealth of knowledge, resources, and services that can ensure families and students are connected and supported to address their health, safety, college and career readiness, learning and development needs. Next slide, please. These are the components of a safe and supportive school environment. Together, these components provide a comprehensive system to support student safety, as well as staff safety, and include a focus on creating a positive school climate and culture, physical and emotional safety, physical environment, and staff well-being. School climate are the beliefs, values, and attitudes and norms routinely demonstrated in the school, including a commitment to equity, race, and social justice. School safety is about ensuring the emotional and physical safety of both students and staff. Physical environment ensures that the school building and surrounding space is safe for students and for staff. For example, ventilation, noise, and temperature are controlled and monitored to make sure that students and staff are learning and working in comfortable working environments. And it also ensures that students are safe, as well as staff, from physical threats, including violence, crime, biological, or chemical threats. And as Director Cornyn had stated before, staff wellness and self-care is so critical and important. And this is why we've included it in the whole child framework, because as she had said, in order for adults to take care of children and their whole child needs, we must first focus and take care of the needs of the adults who are serving our students. So in this, we ask for our districts and our schools to promote staff wellness by creating employee wellness programs, sharing and encouraging staff to do self-care practices such as physical fitness, getting plenty of sleep, and taking time for oneself. Next slide, please. Challenging, preparing, and empowering students in a community is a community-wide effort. Partners represent the collective action needed to support each child and increase the likelihood of student success. Everyone, not just those in schools, shares the responsibility of preparing children for a successful future. Partnerships transform the educational experience. Addressing the needs of each child starts with parents and caregivers and extends to schools and other government and community organizations that serve children. The relationship among families, communities, and schools is reciprocal. And we all know that everybody benefits when schools, families, and communities come together and put the whole child at the center of their work. Next slide, please. And the graphic that you saw before is our whole child framework, and this is the supportive narrative that we have created, and which I've really just delivered to you much of the information that's included in the supportive language. It is a blueprint that will guide schools, families, and communities in creating a common vision and goals for a whole child approach to education. Next slide, please. We recently launched our whole child website, which includes the framework, the supportive language. It also includes resources that you can use to get started right away. Our model is based off of ASCD's and the CDC's whole child framework model, and ASCD has done a great job in providing resources to districts and schools for free in regards to the 5 tenets. So, you know, districts and schools will often wonder, where do I get started, or how do I do this? And this is a lot of work. And you know, the whole child framework is comprehensive, and it needs to be, because we're talking about the needs of the whole child. But one of the things that ASCD offers is a needs assessment, where the school can go in and takes about 30 minutes for a small group of people to sit around and to look at the indicators, to rate themselves. You will get a report back. It's completely free. And then you can start to determine, you know, what areas are of need and which areas do we want to move on. And then think about, how do we include that into our school improvement process. ASCD also provides a network. So if you're, you know, doing this work and you want to know what other folks are doing, other districts, other states, they have a network that you can join, again, completely free. And then you can join that network and learn how other folks are implementing the framework. So I just wanted to say that those resources are on our website. So if you want to get started, that would be a great place to start. And next, the other information we have on our website are resources. And, you know, basically these are resources that highlight and provide tools and resources for the components and the tenets of each part of the framework. This part of our website will become much more robust from where it is today. And what we're really excited about is that in the future, we will be able to provide vignettes and stories and best practices from our districts and schools that are already, and community partners that are doing this work already across the state. Next slide, please. And so we have a pretty strong communication plan. This is a year-long endeavor to really get out the framework, to help folks understand what it is, what it means, and how to use it. We started with our whole child webpage launch on October 21. There is a wonderful video by our state superintendent, Paul DeMaria. It really provides a great overview of the framework and explains everyone's role in meeting the needs of the whole child. There's also our virtual webinar and live events that are occurring, this one being the first, and in the next two, you will actually see vignettes. In the next two, our state superintendent will be talking with districts and schools that are implementing the 5 tenets, and then they're going to share how they're doing that within their schools and within their districts. We also will be developing the whole child framework toolkit, which will include implementation tools and resources, ways to align what you're already doing to the whole child framework. And then also we'll have ongoing social media and other outreach. So I ask that if you're on social media and you help us promote the whole child framework by sharing it with your friends and colleagues. Next slide, please. So I'm happy to announce that we will have our state superintendent, Paul DeMaria, who will be sharing with us a great message. And so now I'm going to turn this over to Paulo.
Thanks, Jen. That's a great introduction. I'm not sure how great my message is going to be, but as is usually my habit, I'm going to start with a great big thank you to everybody on this call and attending this webinar, because to me it demonstrates not only your interest but your commitment to the concepts that are embedded in the whole child framework. And to be honest with you, I've known that there is a high level of commitment to these concepts across the educational enterprise in the state, and I really appreciate that you've taken time out of your schedule. You've taken time to deliberately, be part of this experience, and hopefully you're also committed to the rollout, sort of the implementation, and sharing what you're already doing, because I think that's always the beauty of things. I'm a realist about what the state agency accomplishes. We are not usually the innovators, but what we are is when we see innovation happening, as it does on all these different aspects of the whole child framework, that we begin to sort of put the pieces together, the conditions for that work to flourish and grow even more. And you all are the key partners. Many of you have done this work for a long time, maybe in one component or another, or maybe across multiple components, or what have you. And we appreciate that, and we have learned from that. And now we transition into finding those exemplary practices, sharing those out, supporting others who want to do the things that may already be happening in neighboring districts, or that they've wanted to pursue for a while, and now finally have an opportunity to do that. So thank you for taking the time. Thank you for your commitment and dedication. And we look forward to being partners with you on an ongoing basis. I also want to thank my staff, the governor's office, Director Cornyn, all the other people who have done yeoman's work in terms of putting this framework together and are spearheading the implementation work. I am so proud of this work. It's just a great sort of outflow from the strategic plan, Each Child, Our Future. Strategy 7 is all about the whole child. And one of the first things we did vis-a-vis Strategy 7 was the social emotional learning standards. And then this is sort of the next big piece to really clarify and identify, building off of the ASCD framework. Here are the key components. Let's create a common language. Let's create a common understanding. Let's create a tool that allows us to facilitate conversations about helping to meet the needs of the whole child and what that actually means. And so I think I'm so excited that we are finally at a point where we're releasing this and pivoting now into more deliberate implementation. I also want to highlight the fact that we've got a variety of offices in our agency, and you all have a variety of people across your organizations that are focused on different components of this work, whether it's nutrition or healthcare or mental health care. You take the component, and invariably there's someone in our organization that is already doing amazing work. I love what we're doing in terms of school-based healthcare. I love the partnerships that we're building, leveraging the success and wellness funds with mental health practitioners and county mental health boards. I enjoy a very close partnership with the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services and Director Chris and her amazing team. We are seeing more things happening on a whole wide range of activities, and I feel the momentum, and I hope you do too. And that momentum means that we can do more and more around all those issues. We also enjoy a great partnership with the Department of Medicaid, and are so grateful for the fact that they bring resources beyond school budgets that can actually help cover the costs for some of these services, when the right mix of providers and eligible students and services are achieved. So, which is really another beautiful aspect of this framework, is the sort of explicit recognition about partnerships. So many times we feel like in education that we can do everything ourselves, even though we bemoan that sometimes and say the school is being expected to do this and that and the other thing, in addition to teaching students to read and do math and understand our history. But I think we are increasingly refined in our understanding that a school is a place where students come together, and that it has access to the students of the state on a fairly regular basis. So how do we broker and convene and leverage all the other entities across the state who have a commitment to meeting the needs of children in a really strong partnership? And so I think we've turned the corner and really have found, both ourselves at the State Department, but also in districts and schools across the state, where they recognize that, partners can be great providers and great supporters, and we need them in our schools helping us, which also requires us to understand what they do. So it's not simply oh, well, now that I have a partner doing this work, I don't have to care about it. The best practitioners are the ones where those partners are actually, in, regular staff meetings or leadership meetings, bringing what they're seeing and listening to what others are saying about the needs of students, so that you really create a high quality, synergistic, integrated, coordinated effort to meeting the needs of the whole child. And, and I could go on and on for how these activities dovetail with other things that we're doing, whether it's our deployment of positive behavioral interventions and supports, whether it's our work on trauma-informed practices in schools, culturally competent and culturally relevant practices in schools, all our work focused on equity, and if you keep taking it at that level, you ultimately come down to that very, the crux of Each Child, Our Future, is that each student is an individual. They have their personal needs. And as hard as it is for us to think about it, that our obligation has to be a very personal one to each student, not only understanding what their learning needs are, but also their whole child needs, and then figuring out how we can meet that. And while it sounds like a lot of work, ultimately it's the pathway to success, defining that customized, in many respects, personalized, educational and supportive approach that increases the likelihood that every child is going to succeed. And we have to recognize that given the level of work that requires, we can't help but want to do it collaboratively, because it's going to take all of us working together. And it's also, additionally, this is the real unfortunate part about the time that we're in right now, is that we're challenged by this pandemic. And it makes each of these things we would love to be doing more of a little bit harder, or maybe sometimes a lot harder, because we're seeing, many schools operating totally remotely, which reduces the opportunity for social interaction and for really, being able to get a clear sense of what the needs of students are. We're seeing it disrupt families and create, additional stressors on students, which is, less than ideal. And if you're like me, you're a hopeful person, and I hope for the day when we get past this. I'm excited about the recent announcements about vaccines, but I also know that we have to do the best we can right now, even though we know that that's not going to be as much as we would all hope to accomplish. But that said, it's a combination of our dedication, our commitment, and also our ability to sort of make good choices that reflect safety and health considerations, as well as helping meet students' needs without overtaxing ourselves. Because there's also, part of the whole child framework, there's always this tangent that sits next to it, and that's sort of the whole educator framework. Because if our own team of adults, isn't healthy, isn't, supported in their mental health needs, isn't, taken care of, whether that's through self-care or, our community of support, then that's not good for kids either. So again, I'll end the same way I started. Thank you so much. And we look forward to your continued participation and the additional training and learning that we're going to do together, because you all always will know more and have better ideas about what works than we will, because you're actually doing it and seeing it and experiencing it each and every day. So Jennifer showed you the schedule. We're going to have a very robust, web page. We're going to be looking for exemplars. We're going to be looking for practitioners to share their stories, maybe also practitioners to share their frustrations and challenges, so that we can, engage in a consultative, iterative process that help people overcome those challenges, those barriers, those frustrations that they're encountering. Because ultimately, if we commit ourselves to continuous improvement, commit ourselves to being the absolute best we can be for our students, that's the way we are all going to succeed. My commitment to you is to continue to be a partner, and to provide you with the support, create the conditions for you to be successful, help you overcome the challenges that you face, help you engage in the partnerships that are going to create a positive experience for you in your school and for your students and for the adults at play, in the interest of, ultimately leading to what the strategic plan promises is each child's success for whatever comes after high school in their lives. Because it's only through meeting those whole child needs in combination with an educational experience that's an excellent experience, that's engaging, that nurtures the joy of learning, and helps students nurture their own passions and aspirations, that we're going to be successful. And that individual students are going to be successful, our communities are going to be successful, and our state's going to be successful. So with that, once again, thanks so much for your participation. I'm looking forward to the remaining webinars, the remaining experiences, and just continuing to be united in implementing this framework and supporting you in the great work ahead. With that, I'm going to turn it over to back to Stephanie Siddons. Stephanie.
Thank you, Paulo. It's great to hear from you, and thank you for being with us. So now we'd like to take any questions. We have, again, encouraged you to submit questions in the chat box if you have them. As we indicated earlier, we do hope that you've been thinking about how you may be able to bring back the framework to your district, and think about what elements you may already be implementing, as well as elements that you are interested in implementing as well. So with that, I think, Jennifer, we wanted to start with, so you mentioned the fact that we have the origin of this framework really came from ASCD's model, and so we are joined by Sean Slade, and who has provided a few comments. So maybe you could just help folks know how they can access information about ASCD's whole child framework. It looks like Sean has provided some information in the chat box, so maybe you could just comment on that.
Sure, yes. So I would say, number one, Sean has provided the information in the chat, so you could go ahead and link there directly. Or if you go onto our on our webpage, so if you go to education.ohio.gov and type in whole child framework in the search engine, you will come to our webpage. And in our webpage, if you just scroll down a little bit, you will see ASCD resources, and there you would be able to find the resources you need as well. And then also on our supporting resource page, there are additional ASCD resources.
Great, thanks. And another question that has come in was around whether we are educating our legislators about this work. And I can just share that as we're beginning our implementation, that is among, I think the recommended approaches to sharing the framework with as many of our partners, from who are working in schools to those who are representing us as well. And so that is definitely among the key activities we'll be engaged in along the way. We also have a question that relates to school and child nutrition, and asking around the fact that, so as a virtual school, students aren't able to qualify for an opportunity around pandemic electronic benefits. So I think the question is around whether we can find ways to support those students. And Jennifer, I don't know if you want to make a few comments about that.
Sure. So our plan had to meet the requirements of USDA, and USDA has very specific requirements for how PEBT can be spent and utilized in the states. And that was one of the requirements, was that it could not be used for our schools that are virtual, 100% virtual. Now there has been a new release of funds and guidance that's coming out today, actually, and I don't know if we are going to have any flexibility as a state to do that. I mean, typically virtual schools were never receiving or did not receive school lunch programs, and so our virtual programs were not on the National School Lunch Program, which then, if they weren't receiving lunch originally, then the PEBT was to actually provide funds for lunches that would have been provided to those students in school. So that's why they were ruled out, because again, it was to be a support for those schools and food programs that were using the National School Lunch Program. And then since kids weren't getting the food in the school building, the funds were going to the families so that the families could provide food. Again, I'm not really sure what the guidance is going to be for this next round this year. So we will definitely explore it. We try to make sure that all of our students, are reached, but we also have certain guidelines that we have to stay within.
And Jennifer, maybe you could comment about what other, whether there are expectations for schools to implement components of the whole child framework.
Yeah, so I think, as the state superintendent said, this is about the success of our children. And we know that, and the whole child framework was created, and taking a whole child approach to education is critical in meeting the foundational needs of children so that they can learn. So what we ask is that, and also schools are already doing this work. And so what we ask is that you take a look at the whole child framework. You see where you are at today, what you're working on right now that aligns to the framework. Explore another indicator to see what you could be doing to increase the whole child supports in that area. This isn't a part of our accountability system, but I assure you that our students' success, whether it's on their tests or on other measures that we measure on the report card, are directly related to whether or not students' whole child needs are met. So the expectation is that you use this with your schools, your families, and your communities. You try to develop a common language around what it means to meet the needs of the whole child. You engage your community partners and your families in deciding on a few things that you can do to really forward supporting the needs of your children, whatever that may be within those indicators.
Okay, and Jennifer, maybe just conclude with any additional resources, maybe a reminder of where everyone can find the resources on our website.
Sure. So again, if you go to education.ohio.gov and you go to the department's website, and in the search engine you type in Whole Child Framework, it will take you to our Whole Child page, and that will provide you the link to the framework, the supportive language, and then also resources for implementation. And it will take you to an additional page, which are the resources that we have that help to align what policies we already have currently in place and programs and services that are currently supporting meeting the needs of the whole child.
Great. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for being with us today. We really appreciate your time, and we will be posting the webinar as well on our website, so you can access it at a later time. And please look for more information from the department about our resources. So thank you so much, and have a great day.